Okay, good afternoon everybody. Welcome to this first regular session of the Terena Networking Conference. The title of this session is Simplifying Federation Deployment, and just to start, I would like to know who of you is involved in operating an identity federation. Raise your hands. Wow, okay, that's about half of the audience. So you're definitely in the right room. And you certainly will know that operating a federation, at least in the beginning, is very difficult because, well, the federated identity management topic is not trivial, and some institutions, especially the smaller ones, they often struggle setting up, for example, an identity provider. And I hope that at the end of this session you will have some ideas how things could be made a bit easier for these institutions. And to get into the topic, I would like to hand over the words to Fabio Farina from GARR, the Italian National Research and Education Network, and he will present the IDP in the cloud that is currently being developed and operated by GARR. So the word is yours, Fabio.
Good afternoon, everybody. As Lucas said, this is the solution that GARR proposed for simplifying the adoption of federated identity management solution for smaller organizations that have issue in adopting this kind of technology. I know that you already heard about IDP in the cloud, so I organized the talk so that I'll try to answer the classical W's and H questions related to what IDP in the cloud is, why we did it, how it's made, where are we going, and which are the benefits that are related to the IDP in the cloud service. This is the very first cloud service that GARR made, and the goal of this service is simplifying the deployment and the management by minimizing at most the technical activities and the complexity in joining the hidden federation. IDP in the cloud is a virtual appliance that is given to a home organization, and it's essentially made of two components. One component is the actual IDP that's delivered as a service, and then the users get also identity management tools. Being a cloud-related stuff, IDP in the cloud benefits of all the classical characteristics of cloud. So we have high availability, we have migration, but we introduced the innovative features so that IDPs in the cloud are not just a matter of hosting. We can provide customization, federation to policy compliances, and continuous updates of the whole pool of IDPs in a very, very simple way. We catch the chance of IDP in the cloud also for focusing on the process of adopting the hidden federation, and essentially getting an IDP in the cloud is a very, very simple three-step process. We support the user at the request for a new IDP in the cloud by tutoring the home organization in preparing the documentation. That's it. Essentially, from this on, the service triggers automatically the creation of the IDP, the installation and the configuration of the tools, the pre-production assessment, the enforcement of the policies, and few minutes after the actual creation, the kickstart of the creation, the users have ready-to-use dedicated IDPs, and we tutor them in starting the practices of identity management. This way, the users just need to focus on the management of the identity for their users and the users, and on the services they want, not technology. What the IDP in the cloud looks like for a user is essentially made of three kinds of interfaces. A customized login page, where, for example, SPs and IDPs are shown as co-branded, in this case. Then we have a very, very simple identity management tool, really trivial to fill in the attributes. And finally, we introduced very recently analytics tool for the access logs, so that the IDP manager can dig the access logs and see which are the patterns for assessing certain resources, what are the resources accessed by a given set of users. Why we did IDP in the cloud? Essentially for two reasons. The first and most natural one is that IDP in the cloud is the response that GARR provided to the Terina AAA recommendation for easing the technology aspects for joining identity federations. Why we did this? Trivially because GARR manages the IDEM Identity Federation, that is member of EduGAIN, and we have about 3 million users distributed over 49 member organizations, that counts 53 IDPs, but GARR connects 500 organizations. This means that the IDP number is below the desired level, and we need a tool that lowers the complexity in joining and the time needed to join the federation. Then we had a specific use case, and the use case is a multi-year framework agreement with the Italian Ministry of Health to provide both high bandwidth connectivity through the GARX network, federated services like file sharing, cloud storage, digital libraries, and in particular, the ministry had the case of a national biomedical research database that it's a web service that counts 15,000 end users over 18 organizations, and this is used to keep track of the association of the biomedical researchers to the national projects for that community. The ministry does not consider a valid solution keeping managing all these users centrally. So they asked us to federate the service and spread the load for managing identities over the organizations. I want to spend a couple of words on the research community, because the community is particularly scattered. The researchers usually do not belong to university, but are members of smaller organizations with 200 researchers on average. And unfortunately, GARR can support only research and education organizations that are 58 over the 81. So the number is slightly smaller, but deploying an IDP for each organization is not feasible. It's not feasible because the organization essentially don't care about ICT. They are doctors, they are biomedical researchers, they have very constrained ICT resources, and they want to focus on their job, essentially. Furthermore, there is also a lack of motivation in changing the way identity management is done in the home organization. So adopting a new paradigm starting from the clean slate scares them. Therefore, we designed IDP in the cloud with these two purposes: hide completely the technology complexities, as I said, and also simplifying the procedures, the process for adopting the IDEM federation. How is made? Beside the functional aspect, we had to consider also requirements for GARR itself. And the first one is that we had a limited human resource to manage all the IDP in the cloud. So we had to find an approach that supports us in this goal. We must be fast in provisioning new IDP in the cloud, and we must ensure a high protection to, of course, users' data and in general to the configurations of these systems. So the first step focused on identifying an approach, a strategy to solve the problem. Trivially, we noticed that infrastructure as a service clouds are the killer application for this kind of service, because they allow us to create new virtual machine, managing high availability, managing IP connectivity, managing networking security. Then we identified in the so-called DevOps approach the key point to configure and prepare the IDPs for the users. DevOps is a change of paradigm in system administration. We think usually the system administration as a bunch of scripts that must be run in order to configure or to install a software. DevOps changes the point of view because it requires to the sysadmin to describe the resource in its final state. So you have to say, okay, that machine will have this feature, these characteristics, these tools, in such a way. And then we found a development methodology, and we found that agile continuous delivery is the element that can help us in keep things under control and deploy incrementally new version of the softwares on the whole set of resources without restarting them. Everything is made online, and once this is checked against a test instance, then the changes, the upgrades can be deployed on all the IDPs transparently for the users. Then we needed a toolbox. The infrastructure, the physical infrastructure is made of 12 servers distributed on 2 sites, geographically separated to ensure a minimal disaster recovery. Then we aggregate the storage, that it's a key feature for this architecture, using Gluster for preserving instances, images, and the actual data. And on top of that, of course, we used OpenStack. We use OpenStack to manage both virtual machines, and we use just a single flavor for all the virtual machines, and deploy public IPs. On top of that, we have the actual application tenant with its own network, with a service virtual machine for monitoring, for name resolution, and for Puppet Master. We use Puppet as a core orchestrator engine to trigger the creation and the configuration of the IDPs. In fact, starting from a very thin virtual machine with Ubuntu and Puppet, then we deploy the Puppet recipe, the description of how the IDP will look like at the end of the process. And through Puppet and this light virtual machine, we trigger the actual creation of the IDP, and we get essentially the 3 components I showed you some slides ago: the web interface, the internal LDAP for the attributes, the IDPs, and we ensure that this virtual appliance is compliant to IDEM and to GANT. If user requests us for integrating their own LDAP, the IDP in the cloud template, the recipes, are able to include their LDAP, either by replicating the data or by stitching a VPN connection toward their LDAP. Which are the other benefits? Well, we talked about responsiveness, rapid delivery. We considered these numbers, essentially, and we assumed a skilled sysadmin. We tried the test, and starting from nothing, we tried to install and configure an IDP by hand, and we took about 2 hours and a half. Then we did the same thing using IDP in the cloud, and everything was done in 17 minutes. In addition, as I said, using OpenStack, we have replicated storage, live migration, so we can move machine in case of troubles with the nodes. And by using Puppet, we can automate periodically the updates of the software when a new version of Shibboleth gets out, and the backup for the user's data. Let's talk a bit about compliancy to the federations. And as just a matter of deploying recipes, in some sense, and policy and configurations, we have been able to reduce the complexity of joining them to just a simple fill and sign processes for the 3 basic documents that are always required to join IDEM, namely the member accession form, the IDP registration request, and the document that states the practice for identity management for the privacy. And then we prepared an additional request module for IDP in the cloud itself, so that the user can provide their logos for their own organization, their description, the URL, essentially all the information that go into the metadata for the federation. And trivially, this way we grant that all the IDPs have the same semantics in the attributes. And this copes one of the typical issues with homemade IDPs in some sense. Furthermore, we enforce Refed's recommendation for the discovery pages. As I said, having co-branding on the login page for IDP and SPs. And the users are able to use since day 0 EduGAIN services, because we respect metadata profiles, we respect recommended attributes with control vocabularies, unique IDs, plus, of course, the web SSO profile. As the service is in production, we have been able to collect some feedbacks. And now, the specific case for the Ministry of Health has been resolved because the biomedical database has been federated, and the ministry itself adopted an IDP in the cloud for this project and for the few homeless users that are still around. Last month, we had the Eden workshop in Palermo, and we had very, very positive feedback from the biomed institution that takes care of the livestock's health. And in particular, we observed that they are interested in digital libraries. We are at a good point, but we must do better. We must do better because the process itself is simple. We have a very, very immediate single point of contact for requesting an IDP in the cloud. The whole cycle, considering the bureaucracy and the actual creation, is covered in a couple of working days. But we still have a few IDPs in the cloud. We are ramping up. Probably we will increase further now that the biomedical research database has been federated. And within next year, we will have many more IDPs in the cloud. By the way, the issue of having few IDPs is something deeper than just a matter of adoption rate. it's the usual vicious cycle, no IDPs, no SPs. But we changed something. We changed something because now IDPs are easy. So it's up to the user's request for new services, but there must be interesting federated services around. So probably we must push on the new services, propose new services to the community so that, and this service should be strongly based on federated identities, like the personal storage cloud GARR box we are delivering. And of course, the next step in IDP in the cloud is moving towards the so-called federation as a service. That means, you know what I'm talking about, bringing all the other components of an identity federation, the resource registry, the aggregator, the discovery service, towards virtual appliances. In Italy, there is another very, very interesting community that has the same problem of the biomedical community. And this is the cultural heritage community with about 400,000 people involved in a huge number of institutions, of organizations. What we learned, finally, we learned a lot of things, and we did many, many mistakes because we started from clean slate. And if you are going to start with this kind of services, beware the complexity of the technology. Do not start from the technology. Review your processes. Do a lot of flowcharts, Gantt diagrams, whatever, but do not start digging the OpenStack in particular. It's a huge monster. Puppet is simple. You can learn from it quite easily. There is another point that's important. Lower requirements in adopting this kind of technology triggers many apparently naive questions that need meaningful but simple answers. As I wrote, people don't care about certificate tools. Everything we think it's interesting, people don't. So we must learn to focus on the human federation. They are dynamic. It's a matter of psychology in some sense. We must learn to ignore the technology. I mean, I'm a technologist. And this is everything from my side. And I wish to thank all the person that has been involved in the making of IDP in the cloud. As you can see from the list of persons, Andrea Biancini, Massimo Carboni, Marco Malavolti, Pasquale Mandato, Luca Prete, Sabrina Tomassini, Cristiano Valli e Lalla Mantovani, this kind of projects are not easy. But try. They worth the effort. Thank you.
Well, Fabio has come from the cloud today. He has talked about the cloud, and unfortunately he already has to go to the cloud because he has to catch a flight very soon, so he will be leaving during the session. So if you have questions, now is the time. Please ask your questions if you have.
Yes, just one comment. In any case, Lalla Mantovani will be here for, I think, the rest of the week. So for anything, just ask her. And
Lalla, stand up, please. Yep. Thanks.
Hi, Andrew Cormack from GÉANT. Thank you. One question was, do you actually link the IDP into the organization's own ID management systems, or do you assume they don't have one and you just give them an interface to manage users on the IDP?
No, so far we prepared the option of connecting the IDPs towards the the LDAP on the home organization, but we haven't had a request on that side. The organization that so far adopted IDP in the cloud didn't have identity management tools at all.
My question was very similar to Andrew about how much you moved. It's the IDP in the cloud, not IDM in the cloud. You really didn't move any business processes from the organizations into your work, and so you have to interface with their own business processes?
No, we provide a very simple identity management interface in order to manage their users essentially so far. Nothing prevents to integrate as for the other way for the registry. We use all open sources, so it's quite simple. It's just a matter of the internal policies for the organization, but that's, as I said, they are still ramping up, so we don't have many requests on that sense.
Yeah, so Peter Gietz, Darcy, and Daria, my question is also in the exactly same direction. So I think it's about the business processes. They are quite important. As soon as you want to have these IDPs be member in federations, there has to be some processes to be well enforced. For instance, what happens if somebody leaves the organization? What is the process? How this person will be deactivated in the LDAP? So my questions would be: one, are there any regulations and proposals for such processes? And B, does the current interface built on PHP LDAP is that good enough for doing such processes?
Okay, for the first part of the question, of course, we do assessment before introducing an IDP in the cloud in the production federation. There is a hiatus period in the test federation because we want to be safe 100%. Then about the password, we introduced the LDAP policies so that the password expires, but there is an Italian law that regulates the management for the accounts and the password expiration. Of course, it's up to the home organization respecting this kind of policies. The second part about PHP LDAP admin, we rewrote part of the code. I didn't work on that side, but yes, the tool is quite naive, and we wanted to keep it simple because it's immediate. But we had to patch it because I know that it's not perfect.
Okay, maybe one last question. Sorry
okay.
for the others. As you have heard, Lala still will be here, so you can also ask questions directly to Lala.
Okay, just a quick one. I'm wondering how long it took you to roll out this project?
We took 6 months, and we planned 3.5 FTEs. In the end, we used, I would say, 7 months and a half, but we respected the 3.5 FTEs. Essentially, the delay was due to the provisioning of the infrastructure. The OpenStack nodes had some issues, and we had to wait.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Let's thank Fabio once again. And have a good flight into the cloud.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're coming to the second presentation, which will actually have 2 speakers. This presentation will be a Canadian-Swedish presentation given by Chris Phillips from Canary and by Anders from Swamit. So they will present a similar approach to, well, basically run IDP as a service, but let's see whether their solution also allows you to deploy an IDP within 17 minutes. So I'm excited to hear about that.
So it's going to be a space race, right? Check 1, 2. Are we good? Did it get queued up? Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. There's 2 of us here, and we're going to sort of team present today. And I want to say thank you for all the people who have come here and voted by coming to this presentation. I know there's a lot of other great ones that are going on at the same time, and I see a ton of familiar faces out there, especially from the Refreds community, and welcome to any of the new ones that are in the audience. So my name's Chris Phillips. I'm the technical architect with Canadian Access Federation, and I'm here with Anders from SWAMID. I'd like, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Lördal from SWAMID, and I'm Federation operator.
Microphone.
Oh.
Sorry.
Can everyone hear me?
No. How's that?
Better now? Yeah. I'm Lördal from SWAMID, and I'm Federation operator.
It's going to grab the clicker.
So,
So one of the things that Anders and I were talking about is how can we team present this in a consistent manner without waiting till the end of the presentation for one person and another. And what we gravitated to was, this is really a conversation, and from a collaborative standpoint, we're going to sort of team present some of the slides and give some background to what we've been doing. So for those who don't know Canary, we're the NREN in Canada, but not just the network operator. We have the DARE project, which is the cloud services, as well as middleware services for science and research. And Canadian Access Federation is operated by Canary as well. And for SWAMID, what kind of things there?
SWAMID is a part of SUNET, which is the Swedish NREN. And we deliver fiber optic networks to all the universities and member institutions, and middleware and some other services like storage and such.
Okay. So when you look at what we were trying to do, you have to take a look at the context behind the different federations at the different state of where we were. So CAF, as you can see behind us here, I'm just looking to see what you have, that we have a possible size of 89 universities and about 120 colleges, of which we have about 103 of those is part of our federation. So we're at about a penetration rate of about 48%, just coming over 50. And the most attractive thing that has been used or drives people to us is the EduRoam service. So at the same time as those services that come on board, the challenge is how can we get those folks to both stand up EduRoam as well as the SAML services? And on the SWAMID side?
Well, it's 52 institutions and we have nearly 100% coverage. So one of the main forces are EduRoam, and SUNET has made a deal with the Swedish Airport Authority and the cloud to push out the EduRoam SSID, well, all across Sweden, basically.
Yeah.
So, well,
very envious of the relationship that you have to get over 300 extra locations in the hotel side of things with the cloud side. So even though that we have a different profile, close to 100% coverage versus 50, different style and stuff, we run into the same problem. And so some of those same problems are about the technical staff. It's, as I'm sure you're going to hear the theme throughout the next few days, is that it's a lot of technology. Even though there's a lot of great technology out there, it's about some of the people behind the technology and executing on it. So all the people who are enabled to do so are usually already connected. They're already engaged and such. And so there's a force out there that is this middle tier that we're looking to hit. And in SWAMID's case, it would be...
Yeah, well, as we have almost 100% coverage, our main focus is we're trying to get people to maintain their IDPs. Well, Shibboleth ain't that easy to upgrade if you're not used to it. So we're thinking about giving them a tool to basically redeploy an IDP instead of upgrading the old one.
Thank you. So people have seen the classic approach of having Eduroam and Shibboleth, and you have two teams, and you allow the end user, or you say, here are your choices. Go install this. Great, you signed up to the federation. And the approach that we had is an IDP installer approach. And that is, we want to simplify the experience and have a preferred server to be installed, a preferred platform installed, and especially the pre-configuration and making it as easy as possible to test bed the environment. So we want to reduce the barriers as much as possible. So on the origin of the work, Swamid, referring to you as Swamid. So, Swamid, what did you already have?
Well, basically, I wrote a tool to install an IDP for my own university. And then when Swamid noticed the tool, they wanted it for the Federation. So I extended it to be Swamid specific. And then later on, well, Chris came along and dropped me an email saying he was interested in my work and basically saying, I'm going to build something of my own on this.
Yeah.
It was about then we decided to collaborate.
Yeah. So thank goodness for GitHub and publishing your work. That's first part. Is just like we heard earlier this morning about having the data out there, having your work and some of the time and investments having published. That was how I found the Swamid installer that was being refactored, and we were going through the installation with Eduroam. And the reason you see San Francisco up here is that Internet 2 had an identity week in San Francisco last fall. And that's really where we connected, because that email I sent to Anders earlier was a couple of months before going there. And then when we had that time together, we really laid out what we wanted to do as key principles and the mechanics of it. And one of the core principles was simple as possible, complex as needed. So when you're a person who says, I want to join a federation, and I'm using an existing system, or I'm newly responsible for a service that someone else has transitioned out, so that technology bleed from skills, they're faced with a really daunting learning curve. And so if we look at this installation process and keep it as simple as possible and complex as needed, then we can keep what those practices are near and dear. So with that in mind, the principle that we talked about keeping it as simple drives some of the design. But fortunately, we're a bunch of federation operator geeks and we know the style of problems that we consistently run into of adopting tools. So extensibility in the context of being federation aware, not just can I sign into this thing, because it's the actual IDP, but how can I take this tool and apply it for my federation? What's the profile? So we started out in the first, right at the get-go, on the refactoring together with using a federation-aware environment, and also be slightly technology agnostic. We did say this is a Linux-only build, but we've chosen just ways of deploying things to be technology agnostic. The other thing is about the complexity. So we know it's a complex stepwise process to do things. The SHIB consortium and the SHIB software kept it simple, but there's a lot of preparation beforehand. And one of the things about that, maybe Anders, if you want to talk about something around the certificates. So there's a ton of things there, but one example of hiding this complexity or internalizing is on the certificate side, which was a real plus for me because I didn't have to write it, because we really leveraged the existing material. If you want to chime in.
To get LDAP connection to work properly in using LDAPs, you have to preload Java key store with a full certificate chain from the LDAP server. So I wrote a little snippet that connects to the LDAP server, asking for the certificates, and then parse it through and injects them into Java key store, basically.
So why is this important? Why are we down in the weeds on something like this? We're down in the weeds so our partners don't have to be. So I don't know how many people in the audience in Federation operators, which are like half of you, have a call and say, you know, I can't connect to my directory, or I can't do something with my web server because the key is wrong, or where's the password for this, or why can't I use port 389 on my directory server over the internet? So by us going down to some of the technical things, we can embed some of those, or embody some of those best practices. And that's just one. There's a whole bunch of other pieces with regards to attribute release, setting up for a default experience with test SHIB, and the other point we'd like to make is that as we're going down this, not just on the technical weeds, but rising up to the level of what happens when you have to internationalize. So in Canada, we have a need to be both French and English, but if we're going to have community around this tool, just like Jerome CAT or any of the other Federation as a Service initiatives, multilingualism is a real important part. And so you'll see a little bit later on about how it's sort of woven in instead of a retrofit. So some of the technical details, I don't think this picture is surprising to many. The various versions here, we built on the SWAMED installer, which was originally built on Ubuntu. And we pushed for CentOS, and we tested it with 6.4 and 6.5. We put all the numbers on here to let people know which versions we're working with. And the other thing is that we have an active conversation with some of the SHIB team just to see where SHIB 3 is going and just where we would think about where that would be. So this is the stack. I know, are we going to wait till later for questions? Okay. So the other thing that we see that the installer helps us do is it halves the install time. So if someone comes into the Federation in Canada, and I believe in SWAMED operates both Jerome and the SWAMED, that two different teams. Usually those larger schools, those 15,000 in student and larger, have a great IT team that's not stressed out about services. They have the capacity to have two teams work on different projects. But Anders, maybe you can talk about some of the schools in SWAMED that are smaller ones.
Yeah, we basically have a very small institution. The smallest has something like 20 students, and they have the local IT guy. And in one of the small institutions, a colleague of mine actually had to give a crash course in XML before installing the IDP for them. So, well, that's the reality, and we have to give them either help or some tools to join the federations.
Okay. So as we go through, part of the process of installation is, as we saw in the IDP, the work that GARR had done as well, is there's this plan and prepare state. And there's a number of steps you need to go through, and we require people to go through. And these are a lot of technical things. I don't know how many people in the audience have experienced this. I'm sure everyone. You get down to step 6 of 17, doesn't matter what piece of software, and all of a sudden you need to talk to the firewall admin, or you have to talk to your OpenStack person, or your cloud person, or your VMware person. I need this open, or I need to have this done because I didn't get to it until that point. So the plan and prepare part, we're talking about a bit of social engineering. So we have documentation with our installer, and the installer is crafted in such a way that we have a form, which you'll see in a few minutes, about the Q&A process that we have up front. On the installation, we wanted to keep it as simple as possible. And this is, as you'll see in a few minutes, that SWAMED has actually gone ahead a little bit in this section, gone totally headless, to have the installer run completely end-to-end. And so in their branch of the code, that they've done a full automation there. Whereas our cut of it right now just requires just the user ID, or pardon me, the password for the key stores. And we tried to keep things pretty clean in that respect. And so we can do this with this exact same build because we've structured it to do so. And the other pieces on the process about post-installation tailoring, IDP, the GARR experience, as we saw earlier, has a lot of that already done with Puppet. So in this particular case, we don't use Puppet, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. So this is the point where we're going to take a peek at some of the stuff, and I'm going to ask the tech person to press play on the YouTube. So I'm going to stand back over here. So what you see right now is we're just going to GitHub and fetching the IDP installer. And so this is the CAF build. So this is just a view of right from the beginning, if someone wanted just to use it out of the box, the CAF build. And you'll bring it down to your machine. I better be able to see what I'm talking about. You extract it to your machine, and we've broken out the configuration process to be that of an HTML page. So it uses JavaScript, jQuery, and we built in a lot of information. And so in this particular case, we have EduRoam and we've federated single sign-on, and we have the ability to import an existing configuration. So as we scroll down, you see the different sections. We have EduRoam specific. Now this is which uses free radius. And then we have extra pieces of radius configuration and then the certificate part. Now we get into the federated single sign-on piece, and then we have different parts of it. And the configuration file here is auto-generated. Every time you exit the field, automatically builds it. And you can import an existing configuration, which I believe I'll do in a few moments. As I go through, I'm going to select EduRoam. And then we have color coding in the fields to indicate, it's not going to show up very well on the screen there. To indicate these are the required fields for you to enter. So think of it as this an interview process. We also have tooltips in here to augment the actual fields, because when you're presented with, why do I need the AD domain and isn't that my internet domain? Well, there's different pieces, there's different reasons for different parts of these questions. Again, we spent the time down in the weeds on these topics. So what you're going to see right now is I have a pre-existing configuration that I have as a text file. Going to highlight it, and then I'll paste it into the tool, and it will automatically import it into the configuration and allow us to do some pre-validation. So as this is going on, you see how it turns in the fields to green. These are already validated. Now, right now it's about presence in the field, but we have the opportunity to add in additional ability for more validation. So if you have requirements on different fields for different federations, we can build those in. Now, on the next little bit, we're going to, I believe, open up the SWAMID installer, so I'll give that an opportunity to proceed here. Can we see it on the screen? Oh, good. Instead of craning my neck. All the pictures of me would be like this. So same process, same tool, different build out of Git. So the heritage or the lineage of the software is we have a global one, and you'll see that in a few moments. And now we're going to the SWAMID. And I'm going to ask you to press pause there in a second. On this one, can you do it? Thank you. Thanks very much. I didn't tell him before. It's a trick. Oh. Can you go back to it? Thank you. So this is the fork in the road on the federation. When we decided, say, federation aware, CAF it's just alphabetical, but anyone can, when you fork it from Git, you can add in your own federation. You can do your own thing here, and you can tailor it. And if you can press space, please, or continue the video. So this is the SWAMID view. So exact same stuff, and again, I can't speak Swedish or read it.
Yeah, basically translate the page with the whole of the EduRoam part taken out. Because within SWAMID, we don't endorse having the SAML IDP and the EduRoam IDP on the same host.
And if you could press pause again, please. Thank you. So one of the things that we did with internationalization is we wanted to consolidate, us as developers and the technical types. We didn't want to go in all different spots inside the tool. We wanted to gravitate to a single properties file or a single spot for internationalization. Because if you're going to adopt this tool and define a profile for your organization, some of the ReFeds attendees from yesterday saw Roland's presentation about the tester, and there was a question, what profile? It's not that you're incorrect, it's your federation has a certain footprint of technology. And so in this particular case, SWAMID doesn't use the EduRoam, and we have everything in one spot. And I think we're pretty well at the end of that, so if you can switch back, please. So one of the things that we noticed is we had to choose wisely. There's a lot of great tools out here, and I'm looking in the audience, there's a lot of developers and people who have contributed stuff. And we had to choose what driven by our principles and requirements, how did they match with what Anders and I wanted to do with our respective federations, and how does that influence what we chose? So we look at the what that we had to do. We had some various different places to choose. There's a lot of text on this slide, so we're just going to highlight a couple of pieces. We know it's going to be archived on the TNC site. Anders, maybe you can speak to a couple of the pieces here.
Yeah, well, if you have a centralized command and control, like GARR has, then you have the complexity and running all the Puppet stuff. So, well, not all sysadmin wants to use Puppet. And a preloaded VM, yeah, well, who's going to maintain it? But if you have your own host to your own university standards and then use a deployer, then you have the same look and feel on all servers. Just go ahead and patch. And oh, I think it's on the next slide.
Yeah. Okay. There was a big decision to be made here for us both, and that adoption of how much could we as smaller federations support from an implementation standpoint. And again, it's not a question of one way is wrong and another way is right. It's a question of how well can what your requirements are, and we had to walk through those, and we came out at the installer tool style. So once we decided what style in which we wanted to chase our implementation on, we looked at how could should we continue on the same path as the existing bash installer script and augment it with some extra pieces. Again, we're looking for the slimmest, simplest thing to tackle a complex configuration problem. On this particular side, we looked at Puppet and Chef and said, you know, that's really attractive, but not everyone is going to take that model where you can be a command and control infrastructure. Institutions have autonomy, and they want to control their own environment, and they want to work at their own pace. We could have chosen various different languages, but we had a lot of good stuff to work with already. And the existing script structure, by being able to have abstracting out some of the interactiveness out of it into an HTML environment, as we just saw, allows us to really make it simple and keep it slim. Because what we've also found is that when sites do the installer route, the next moment they actually add their own configurations. They add their own monitoring, they add their elements. So rather than prescribe something for someone, we say, here's this component, and we've done as much work as we can in that space. Anything else? Okay.
I can mention in an early version, instead of the HTML interface, there was a whiptail that basically asked inline questions, but not very user-friendly, so we decided to change it.
So for those who are not at the command line all the time, the whiptail is a tool that's on the Linux OS that allows you to do interactive questions, and so by pulling that out, it simplified our actual work in delivering something that can go headless, because we wanted that ability to go. So from a usage perspective, just as a time check, I know there's only about 5 minutes left. Lucas was really great as a chair. He recommended that we also feedback on who's using what, where, and when. And right now in CAF, we're at a beta stage, and we're just waiting feedback from some of our initial sites so we can transition to general availability. We want more usage. And we're also here, both of us are here in front of you today to ask you if you are interested in doing it, to feedback to us as well. On the side feedback we've gotten so far, we had one site that had a great positive experience early on with the eduroam component of it, to the point that they're saying, you know, I want to have eduroam as my only SSID on campus. And we see that as a great sign and a great validation that we're headed in the right direction. Any experiences in SWAMET, Anders?
Yeah, mostly positive. And as you can see, we have at least 4 sites running, and one of them went head over heel, wanted active standby, and sorry, I lost the word. A fallback for if one server failed. So they basically deployed the script on 2 machines and added heartbeat.
So how did we manage the change? As we mentioned, that we connected in San Francisco. What we did is we used Google Docs just for a shared journal to track what pieces we were working on. We used Skype calls about every other week. And we use Git as the main repository for the information. So today, I'm sure there's probably someone going on Git right now, is probably downloading it. But we have a model, we've adopted a pattern where we have an organization called IDP Installer Global. And if someone is going to take a look at this or wants to base their work off this, you just fork it from the global and create your own. It's pretty wild west on GitHub. There's no controls. We recommend this pattern, and we loosely couple it. And what happens here is it's okay for us to get, as organizations, to get out of sync, because we don't want to have to tie our wagon to each other, and we can only go so far as our partner. Because as this scales out, as we hope it will, and have additional people adopt it, that you have the ability to go a bit further down and also promote code back in. So your number one topic may not be our number one topic, but you can still contribute and we can push the code back in. And so we're standing here today inviting you to take a look. So if you want to clone one of ours right now, just write out a Git as you saw in the demo. The links are here. And if you really want to fork and do your own for your own federation, our estimate, I think, is a couple of hours for an existing federation that is out of the box. But we hope maybe, I think this Wednesday at lunchtime to have a conversation, and anyone is welcome to join in and for that conversation. And we want to say thanks.
Thank you very much, Chris Phillips and Andros Lördal. Well, I would have loved to ask whether your solution also works with the SHAC Unikern reliable horn length, or whether it works with Windows, but probably there are better questions from the audience. One or two quick questions.
So the question is about support. Do you have any plans for supporting the institutions that use this in a year or 2 or 3 when they will come back? I'm pretty convinced that they will come back and ask you, not that it's your responsibility, but you're the point of presence there.
That's a good question. It's pretty standard fare. I'm going to go back in the slide deck. I can speak from a CAF perspective. Whoop. It's a classic stack. So what we've added here is a very slim configuration and overlay against existing software. So it falls into the existing support track that we have now with CAF, which I think is similar to others. And that is, if they have a problem on the actual connection of interfederation part, that's where we can help. But if we can offer best effort, and SHIB users and we have a CAF technical forum where it's more of a community support, as you've seen at SHIB users, for I'm trying to do something a little different. What about Swamit and support?
Yeah, well, basically our support model is if you need to upgrade, download and deploy again, and deploy a new IDP with the saved configuration from last time, then just copy over the metadata and the contents of the database. Then you're up and running again.
It's a real DevOps play. When you think about we were asked about the 17 minutes. It's 7 to do it on a VM local on your laptop, to do a full one that can sign into test SHIB after you have the deployment. Now the key is you need an Active Directory backend, or you need an LDAP backend to connect to actually connect and pull those certificates to really ensure the best practice.
Maybe one last quick question. Yes.
So when you did your decision using not Puppet but an own script, was the question about updating any, did you consider that? Because as we saw from the GARR colleagues, they not only are able to install but also to update the software versions. Is there anything in your plans on this?
Yeah, basically the decision was that we want the SysOp to be able to tweak the script. Not only, well, every institution is unique. They got their own backends and everything, so we want it to be easy to tweak, and not everyone is familiar with Puppet. So it will be easier for a standard SysOp.
The other thing is we don't want root. When you're using Puppet and you're using a command and control style, there's GARR is fortunate in that they have the latitude. I'm implying that they have root, but they have privileged access to those VMs, whereas this is something that's arm's length and under the autonomy and control. And in our environment, we don't have as much latitude as some other federations do. And I think there's pluses and minuses to both, because yeah, there's the if you can do a Puppet play, then you can say this is what it is. And if someone tweaks something down there, Puppet will change it back on you. So that's also something, because the very first time we had someone in CAF use it, the very first thing they did was customize the VM to their footprint for support, like monitoring, adding Nagios, their own special Nagios plugins. So there's lots of good questions there, and I know David has some, but I also want to respect.
I'm sorry to interrupt here. There will be a coffee break afterwards. Oh, okay. Well, not a coffee break, but the break before the opening reception, which will be at 6:30. I hope you all will be there. Remember to wear your badge, otherwise you won't be allowed to enter. Okay, well then let's thank again Anders and Chris.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you.
And now we come to the last but certainly not least presentation in this session, which will be given by Daniela Pöhn from the Leibniz Rechenzentrum. She will talk a bit about the GÉANT TrustBroker, which is an open call project, and yeah, I leave the rest to Daniela to explain.
Okay, thank you, Lucas. Now we switch from the IDP side to the federation. So the open call project, GÉANT TrustBroker, is about dynamic interfederation identity management. Two colleagues and I are currently developing it at the Leibniz Supercomputing Center, and here we go. First, I want to give you a short introduction into the open call project itself. Then talk about the motivation, give an overview over the GÉANT TrustBroker, and then step into the details like the workflow, the initiation of the workflow, metadata registry, and this additional feature attributed repository before I conclusion. So the GÉANT TrustBroker is basically about dynamic establishment of technical trust between the identity provider and the service provider. This means that the metadata is exchanged on demand via the first time contact of the user. So the user initiates the technical trust between IDP and SP. So we give the power from the IDP administrator to the user. It's an open call project, as I already said. It has the same duration as the GN3+. Which means we started in October last year, and the project will finish, at least for now on, in the end of March next year. But we hope that we can go on in the GN4 project as well. We have to write an internet draft to the IETF this summer. As far as I know, my colleagues started it today. And one of our next tasks is implementing a Shibboleth-based prototype. We decided to work with Shibboleth because we have more experience with Shibboleth from past projects. We're running the IDPs from the Munich universities, which means we have around 150,000 users. So that's why we chose Shibboleth. The current situation, well, we have more or less two different kinds of federations. The national federations operated by the NRANs. For example, in Germany, we have the DFN-AEI, and sometimes we also have community federations operated by research communities or projects. For example, smaller projects set up their own federation in order to exchange data. And last but not least, there's also the Interfederation Edugain, which is an umbrella federation over the national federations, which you can see over there in the picture almost every country in Europe is a member of GANT, and several others are eager to join. So this is the current situation, which results in some problems. For example, the IDP and the SP have to be in the same federation or interfederation exchange data via the federated identity management. So, for example, communities or projects need to participate in a national federation, or they need to join GANT as a federation. What was one topic at the FIM4R meeting, for example. It also might be that IDPs and SPs need to join several federations in order to have their projects running. And research partners outside of GANT or national federations cannot make use of the federated identity management if they are working in a research collaboration with some other institutes. So basically we have, let's say, those two federations. It can be something different as well, with an IDP, well, more or less 3 IDPs, and an SP, German researcher, a researcher from the community, and a researcher in the industry. They all want to access a wiki, for example, a project wiki, as you can see here, with different results. So the German researcher can mainly access the wiki immediately, while the others have to wait or have no access because there's no trust. And there are some other further issues, as we said or heard in the further presentations before. The initial efforts are quite huge in comparison to the rest of the life cycle. Many IDPs and SPs need to set up some bilateral contracts in order to exchange data. And there's also manual work to be done. The IDPs need to set up the configuration, which means attribute filters, then attribute conversion rules, release policies. That's one reason why users may have to wait. They have to inform the IDP administrator if something is not working, he has to look up, etc. And there's also the trust issue. It's not only about the technical trust, but also about the behavioral trust. The IDPs have to trust the SPs in order to get the required attributes. That's mainly one of the reasons why the Code of Conduct is developed by Mikael Linden. You can maybe ask him about this topic as well. And there's also a limitation through the schema. Though we talk about the harmonization of attributes, it might be that some projects need further attributes which are not in the common schema of GANT or in the federation. So it is difficult for them to get all the attributes. That's how we come to the GÉANT TrustBroker. So our goal is to connect the IDPs with the SPs, independent of federation borders, and to do this dynamically, on demand, and to automate also the configuration in order to minimize the time the users have to wait and to minimize the work the IDP administrators have to be done. So we have, again, 2 federations, but this time there's a GÉANT TrustBroker in the middle. The SP registers himself with the metadata. The IDP gets the metadata from the GÉANT TrustBroker. The IDP is auto-configured, and the researcher gets more or less immediate access. So the basic functionality for us is to automate established workflows, so to reduce the setup work for the IDPs and to reduce the waiting time for the users. Also, we give the power to the users in order to establish the trust between IDP and SP, so the users know which service they want to use. And we have 2 additional features, the account choosing functionality, which you can see in a mock-up later onwards, and the attribute conversion rule repository. The attribute conversion rule repository is more or less set of attribute conversion rules in a repository which can be reused in order to transform some attributes. And one rule for all, so only one IDP administrator has to write the rule and others can reuse it. I come to that later onwards again. What is basically needed? Well, plug-in and registration, as far as we've developed it. And the GÉANT TrustBroker complements existing approaches, so it can be used parallel to the national federations and the interfederation. Here we go. So the workflow basically, how do you establish the technical trust via the GÉANT TrustBroker? A researcher wants to use a service at a service provider, and the researcher also chooses his IDP at the GÉANT TrustBroker, which is quite normal at the discovery service. Then the researcher also triggers the technical trust establishment by choosing his IDP at the GÉANT TrustBroker, and the service provider registers his metadata and some other further information at the GÉANT TrustBroker. This is step 2. This data is redirected, first the GÉANT TrustBroker redirects the user to the IDP for the authentication. The IDP also fetches the metadata of the SP and gets automatically configured. And also the IDP can look up for attribute conversion rules. Afterwards, the IDP sends an assertion or more to the SP, and the researcher gets access to the service, which is done in step 5. So let's see how the user establishes the trust. So the user can't see his IDP in the list in the discovery service, so he chooses GÉANT TrustBroker, or maybe he had some bad experience, did not had access to the service, so he chooses GÉANT TrustBroker. There he can choose his IDP. Basically, yep, he can choose his IDP. Or also there's this account choosing functionality here, where he can add some other additional accounts, for example, Google, Facebook, or whatever. Then the user is redirected to his IDP for authentication and he gets access. So the most basic part of the GÉANT TrustBroker is the metadata registry, as the MDS, the peer project, and some other things. Well, what we additionally do is to automate the workflows. SPs and IDPs need first to register and install the plugin in order to automate the configuration. While uploading the metadata and registering, the ownership of the domain and the metadata are validated similar to the peer project. And the more or less new function is the exchange of metadata on demand. So the IDP and the SP don't get all the metadata of EduGAIN or the federation, but only the metadata they really need. The metadata is then automatically added to the local configuration, and this is why the technical trust is established. Basically, that's like the additional feature is the attribute repository, as I've already said. So what are the typical conversion rules which we have? That's, for example, renaming at the LDAP repository. At our institution, we have this attribute called GCOS. I don't know what it is exactly, but it's more or less commonly named as display name, so you have to rename it. Transforming data format is quite normal as well in Europe, and you can imagine all the data formats. And there's another option which is splitting and merging. So here we need the attribute role administrator, which is Yeah. But there are also some other information within the DN entry. So we use regular expressions to get this attribute administrator out of it. Merging, well, combining given name and surname into common name, for example. What we want to do with the attribute repository is to store attribute rules, which can be searched and reused by other administrators by templating them. This could be possible, for example, within a federation or within a project. Those rules can be fetched via API calls with a plugin or some scripts. We still have to work on this part. And they can be changed, of course. The administrators get notifications if the rules are changed. And the rules are automatically added to the local configuration and also automatically updated. So basically our goal for this feature is that only one IDP has to create the role, and other administrators within the federation or project can reuse it. Hopefully the SPs then receive all the requested attributes as well. And we had last week a video conference with Hexa. They might use the attribute conversion rule as well as a service, for example, as an online service for the attribute authorities. So here we are again. We have several IDPs, an SP and another federation, the GÉANT TrustBroker. And one IDP writes a conversion rule for one special SP, and others can reuse it. Of course, most of the attribute conversion rule updates, calls, etc. are done via the API with a plugin, but we thought about one website to have an overview over the rules which you are using, just to visualize it. So you can manage your own rules, upload, download, change, delete them, as well as you can search for other rules, and you have an overview of the rules you use from other administrators. So what are the advantages of GÉANT TrustBroker? We have the metadata registry, where you can download metadata and exchange trust metadata on demand. The attribute conversion rule repository, where rules can be changed and reused and added automatically to the local configuration as well. And what do we do? Basically is to be a virtual IDP and SP in order to seamlessly integrate into the SAML workflow. That's where we are right now working on. One of the next tasks is the prototype. We have further developments in GÉANT 4, and hopefully the pilot will also start in GÉANT 4. What I have done so far are the workflows. We have set up the requirements, worked on the data models, data access layer, started with the protocol, so basically the communication between the service provider and the trust broker, as well as the GÉANT TrustBroker to the IDP. And the next part of the protocol will be the data conversion rule repository called from the IDP to the GÉANT TrustBroker. You also have to work on the plugin for IDP and SP, implementation of the prototype, writing the internet draft in summer, and of course some documentation work as well. So lots of work still to do. Quite busy with that. So if you have further questions, you can ask them. You can also contact us via email or look at the GÉANT TrustBroker intranet site for further details.
Thank you very much, Daniela. And we have about 10 minutes for questions, and I see there is already one from Andrew.
GÉANT, there we are, Andrew Cormack from GÉANT. Question I asked yesterday about another automation scheme, if I want to gain access to your service provider, what stops me setting up my own IDP, which will assert any attributes that you happen to trust, and just running straight through the process and getting the SP to trust me?
Well, of course, basically you can always set up an IDP, but it also means that you have to, well, put some effort in it to establish or to set up it. And
how valuable is your resource? How valuable are the resources you're protecting? If it's a major publisher, I'm very happy to spend time setting up an IDP rather than buying a subscription to their journals.
But here you have also normally, most of the times the IDPs are from universities, so the attributes can be trusted, hopefully.
How do you limit only to those? How do you limit only to those IDPs? I'm the University of Andrew.
Just have to go through the slides again. Ownership and metadata are validated, and maybe you can also blacklist, if you want to, some IDPs or whitelist. So if you're a service provider and you only want IDPs from universities, you can blacklist or all the others or whitelist only the universities. And we try to validate the ownership of the IDPs and the metadata. And
against what? Sorry.
Read the.
I'd look really hard at that threat model, because I think it's a problem for any automated make a connection between an IDP and an SP, is that if I am able to create my own IDP, there needs to be some, and I think it's human check somewhere to say, no, this isn't an IDP we want.
Well, we can have an intermediate step, of course, no problem. If GÉANT runs, for example, GÉANT TrustBroker, why not?
Hello, Ivan Novakov from CESNET. And from the point of IDP, the IDP will never know whom will it release attributes to. There might be legal issues, or I, as an administrator of an IDP, will feel concerned about it.
Well,
allow just automatic interconnection with any service. I don't know the service. Yeah.
Well, we have also an intermediate step where you can accept or non-accept the service provider.
Yeah, there is a human interaction, right?
Oh, well, you can do that. It's not the basic workflow, but there's a side workflow where you can accept or non-accept. And further on, well, I suppose next year we want to have some vetting or watching process as well, so the IDPs or the users can also vote for a service provider or not.
Any more questions? I have yet one. So you mentioned that you just started working on a prototype implementation for Shibboleth. So what exactly would have to be changed in Shibboleth to make this work? So which components would have to be extended or altered in a way to interact with the GÉANT TrustBroker?
Well, that's a good question. I'm actually not working on the implementation part, only on the more theoretical. We have some intermediate steps and some scripts which write the metadata into the configuration. That's at least what we thought about it. But we still have to well, validate it and see how it works.
Okay, well then I'm excited to see how that prototype works in real life in about half a year or a year. And well, maybe you will present that then here at the next TNC. So thanks very much. Thank Daniela Pöhn again. And this is the end of this session. As you have heard, there will be the opening reception at 6:30 at the other hall that we had the plenary. Bring your badge, as mentioned, and if you don't know what to do in the meantime, As was announced, there are posters in this area. There are two kinds of posters. There are the regular posters and there are student posters. And the students put a lot of effort into creating these posters, and therefore they certainly would love if you could review these posters. After all, the students are your fellow engineers, younger generation that will move up the ladder, and show them your appreciation by reviewing their posters. Thank you very much and enjoy the reception.